what makes a deal a good deal versus a bad deal when you're looking to acquire?
Like most forms of real estate, right? You've got your subject property, but then you also need to look at the market around the property because it's all about location, right? So when we have a facility come across our desk, we have, and even before that, we have an acquisitions team. So we have offshore virtual assistants that are smiling and dialing. And then we also have onshore virtual assistants, and then we have our in-house director of acquisitions. And if the deal makes it that far, then it goes to my partner Joe, who's in charge of acquisition. So we have a whole team that's vetting a lot of deals.
Welcome to the Real Estate Law Podcast. Jason Muth here with straightforward short-term rentals and pride away stays. Rory Gill, our resident attorney and real estate broker. Rory, we're going to be talking today about kind of a boring topic, even though I shouldn't say that. It's going to be a great topic. It's a boring investment opportunity. And these are the words of our guest. Okay, so I'm not just making this up. It's all over his social media. So, we're going to be talking about self-storage today and ways to actually make some money that, maybe you don't have to lift all that many fingers for.
I mean, boring sounds good to me. We work in Massachusetts a lot where being a landlord to people is a really, really difficult and risky proposition. So here we're going to explore being a landlord to people's stuff, which is an entirely different legal proposition with its own set of risks and rewards. But for people who are tired of putting up with tenants, this is something you want to tune in and maybe consider.
Yes, exactly. We're all looking to diversify our portfolios. The deeper you get into becoming a real estate investor, the more you're saying, geez, I don't want to deal with actual human tenants anymore. And maybe there are some other ways. So we've invited Tom Dunkel, the Chief Investment Officer with Dellrose Storage Group. Did I get that right, Tom?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we invited him on the podcast. So Tom, you're now our resident expert in self-storage. So welcome.
Awesome, Jason, Rory. Hey, it's great to be with you and all the listeners. It's pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to tell you about all my boring stories about self-storage.
Yeah. I was kind of looking through some of your materials and your website beforehand, and I saw a post that you guys made. Are you interested in a boring cash flow investment opportunity? And that's why, Rory, I did tell you I was going to go down the boring road right here because our episodes are not boring. I think people listen to us and they listen to the full episodes, but sometimes the way to make money and good money is through boring investments, right, Tom?
100%, Jason. And that's the thing. It's a boring investment, but I don't know about you. I get excited about great returns that are tax advantaged and in a growing industry. The fact that it's boring is really just a message to our investors that you can put your money into self-storage and you can sleep well at night.
Yeah. Here's why it's boring. I mean, we're all so conditioned to watch HGTV and DIY Network and all the shows on cable.
Right.
And we have friends who are investors ourselves. And, it sounds kind of sexy to be getting these huge, beautiful vacation homes or flipping houses or, smashing walls to bits and then like rebuilding them within a half an hour and having it look fantastic. Self-storage and storage units and not just storage of boxes. I mean, some of your opportunities are storage of large vehicles, for example. The only experience that I have is driving past a lot of these places saying, I wonder who owns that, or I wonder if that thing makes any money. And two, Storage Wars on TV from way back in the day. What was that, like, in the 2000s? Is that when that show came out? And that was when people would buy storage units that, were abandoned, and they'd find these treasures, and producers would probably stash stuff inside of them that would make it a sensational story. But nobody talked about actually buying and investing in the actual facility. So that's something where you come in, Tom.
That's right. Yeah, we've been in many asset classes over the years, but when we found self-storage about 2017, 2018, it just checked so many boxes for us because at the end of the day, we're investors, right? I mean, we're building a company and we bring in outside investors, but we invest in all of our own deals. And we have, like many companies out there that are doing equity syndications, putting investor groups together. We started with ourselves and then close friends and family, and we sort of grown from there. But we know our investors, and we know our tolerance for risk, and we know what we're looking for in a quality investment opportunity. So having been at this, going on 18 years myself after my stint in corporate America, self-storage looked great. It's a growing industry. It's a steady industry for 40 years, guys. 40 years. It's a long time. Occupancy at self-storage facilities around the country has gently meandered between 80 and 90%. So it's used in good times, because in good times, right, people are buying stuff, they're making money, they're, buying the extra bike or the kayak, whatever, and they need a place to store it. In bad times, you've got houses that are needing to be sold or downsized, or there's divorces going on. The economy might be in trouble. People are, instead of having their own place, they're combining households, and that generates the need for storage. And now where we're at is the millennial generation is starting to hit the point where they are going to be hitting their prime spending years, right? They're starting to have kids, they're buying houses, they're doing all this stuff. And millennials seem to be wanting those smaller houses. They're not really interested in the McMansion. They want to have the smaller house so they can stay mobile and they can go and live their lives a little differently than the baby boomers, right? So they're wanting to travel. They're wanting to, go kayaking and mountain biking and all that stuff, and have a smaller, more manageable living situation. But they still want their stuff. So the millennials are now, really starting to push the demand side of the self-storage industry, which is something we're super excited about.
Mm-hmm. So we actually rented a storage facility. Actually, Rory, you had one when you were occupying a WeWork for your office, because your office was 45 square feet, something ridiculous like that, for some insane amount of money.
Yeah. So for me to keep anything, I needed to have a self-storage space, but it struck me how many businesses were using the space too. The one I used had a package receiving service as well. And I would see all the names of the different businesses that were using the space in a very similar way to I was. So it was eye-opening a little bit to see who's using the storage space here. It's not people who are just in between moves. It's not just people who are on bad times. It's people using it for a wide range of things. So that's what stood out to me. And also how clean some of the facilities were around, clean and new. Some of the facilities, at least around us, were.
Yeah, I tell you, you're hitting, Rory, on something that's really exciting for us here at Dellrose Storage Group. In fact, we just a couple months ago acquired our first Contractor storage facility. So this is a facility that there's no 10 by 10s or 10 by 15s like at a normal, what we would call a retail self-storage facility. These are larger format units that are like maybe 18 by 30 or 20 by 50. And they've got a large 14-foot roll-up door and a high ceiling. And so the tenants for this type of product are contractors, right? So they're landscapers, they're carpenters, they're plumbers. In fact, the facility that we acquired was built by a plumber because he got kicked out of his home garage and needed to find a place, and he couldn't find one. So he went and started building out this facility over time. And now all of a sudden, there's 100 units there, and we acquired the vacant lot across the street. We're going to expand onto there. But at this particular facility, every time we have a tenant that moves out, the tenant in the unit next door or down the way, calls their buddy who's also a contractor and says, hey, this unit came open, because this place is always full. And we've been, in the short time we've owned it, we've been able to push rates almost 20% already, just because of the demand for this type of facility. So it's a very exciting space. And one of the drivers here is, I'm sure everyone's seen the big Amazon warehouses going up and that sort of thing. Well, they need last mile kinds of locations to store stuff, right? So these larger distributors are starting to gobble up flex space, like the 15, 20, 40,000 square foot flex spaces that used to be occupied by these types of contractors. So they're getting priced out of that market, but they still need a place to go. And they can't go back to their garage at home. So they're looking for storage like this. And it's something we're super excited about.
So they're taking up the space in like a light industrial condo, in our industrial parks that are in all of our towns. And
That's right.
instead, that contractor that still has, 2,000 square feet worth of stuff, maybe they're parking it in one of your facilities or elsewhere, and then they're having a small office somewhere else instead of having a 10,000 square foot industrial condo that has their office, their break room, their
Yep.
stuff, their shop. Yeah.
Yep. Spot on, Jason. That's absolutely right. And this has encouraged us to not only search out more facilities like that or to even build them, but we're also looking at our empty units at our retail spaces. And so instead of just doing Facebook geo ads for someone that might be moving or an individual or a household need, we're now doing Facebook geo ads for contractors in those markets and pharmaceutical representatives in those markets to say, hey, we've got these 10 by 10s or these 10 by 15s or 10 by 20s, whatever, the more retail size. Because for us, it would be great to help diversify our revenue stream from strictly households to a mix of households and businesses.
Business, yeah. When you're taking over one of these spaces, I have so many questions now I can think of. You're doing the marketing also, right? Or do you have a team that runs the business, or is that part of what you're offering or doing?
Yeah, so here's how we handle it. So we line up the deal, right? We do all the due diligence, and man, we weed through a lot of opportunities to get to the good ones. And then once we take down the property, we have an in-house hybrid management structure, we call it, where we have a human that's assigned to each facility, but they're not there 24/7 because a lot of the facilities are generally full, right? So why do we need someone on site, twiddling their thumbs all day? Because of course, personnel, as anyone can probably guess out there, if they don't know for sure, is one of the biggest expenses when you're running a business, right? So if we can have one human covering 3, 4, 5 facilities, that just helps us be a lot more efficient in that regard. But when it comes to the marketing, we do have a team here in-house that is handling the marketing, frankly, not only for our investor outreach, but we do also have them looking for customers in the markets where our facilities reside.
Yeah. Because so here's kind of the two sides to this investment. If you're listening, trying to figure out like how does, Tom and his team make money, right? So you're buying these properties at a good price. You are improving them, either with rates, you're bringing them up to market rates, or you're bringing occupancy up. And then I'm guessing there's an exit at some point as well, where you're getting the money back for your investors. But the time in between, you're actually also the operator, which is why you have to have a team of people who are doing the operations for those businesses to grow them up to that point that you could then have the exit. Does that sound about right?
You're spot on, Jason. Yeah, we're an owner operator. So we find and acquire the facilities. We bring in our outside investor partners. We are acquiring existing facilities that are not being run very well. A lot of these facilities are what we call, mom and pops. Like I mentioned earlier about the plumber who owned it. Like, he's not a storage guy, right? He's not going to the national conferences or getting the education or, learning about the trends and technologies that are really making the self-storage business a lot more efficient. So they're not running the facility very well. So we come in with our professional management team and our technology, and we're able to push rates and make the facility more efficient. And so we push up the value of the facility over a period of time, and then we sell it, and our investors get their money back and their return. And then hopefully, if we did our job well, they'll roll those proceeds into the next deal with us so they can get that compounding effect.
When you talk about the technology, what are some improvements that you make on the facilities that you're purchasing?
Sure. Well, for those watching on video, I got a visual aid here. So anyone out there wants to have a little fun, you can scan this QR code and you can rent on your smartphone a storage facility at our storage facility outside Baltimore in White Marsh, Maryland. And so the purpose of this is that, again, we don't have a human at the facility all the time, but consumers, one of the biggest drivers for them choosing to rent at a particular facility is because they drive by it, right? So if they drive by and they can't get inside to talk to anybody and nobody's there to begin with, they can scan this code with their smartphone and they can fill out their paperwork on their smartphone, sign with their finger, and enter in their credit card information, which we then put them on auto pay. So it becomes like a Planet Fitness membership where it becomes more of a pain in the butt to actually cancel it than to just suck it up and continue paying. So we love that. But once they're finished with that, filling out that form, which doesn't take much time at all, they get a gate code texted to them. So they can punch it in right there as they're outside the gate. They can drive in, find their unit, roll up the door. There's a lock in there waiting for them. They can unload their stuff, lock it up, and be on their way in a matter of minutes. No mom and pop operator out there does anything like that. And in fact, a lot of the moms and pops, you have to call them. And if you do even get somebody on the phone, you're having to schedule an appointment sometime in the future to get in there. And of course, today's busy society, go, they're not going to mess with, a customer's not going to mess with that. They're just going to go to the next facility down the street. Yeah. That's just one small example.
The one Rory and I rented a space at that same place that Rory had his office at as well. When we were between our places, we'd sold our place in South Boston and we moved up here to Newburyport. We needed to declutter a little bit for the open house. So we got, I don't know what the size of the unit was, but I didn't talk to a soul the entire time that we were renting that out, right? Mm-hmm. Like I talked to nobody when we rented it. When we were there, we talked to nobody. I'll talk to anybody, right? But yeah, it was a seamless process that involved technology. It was a climate controlled facility. Everything worked great. It was clean. We had no issues. Move in, move out. Literally saw zero people who work for that company. So that doesn't surprise me that, what you've described is kind of the way of the future for these self-storage facilities. You did mention earlier, that you kind of get a lot of deals that you guys are vetting and, they're not all good deals. Like what makes a deal a good deal versus a bad deal when you're looking to acquire?
Sure. Well, like most forms of real estate, right? You've got your subject property, but then you also need to look at the market around the property because it's all about location, right? So when we have a facility come across our desk, we have, and even before that, we have an acquisitions team. So we have offshore virtual assistants that are smiling and dialing. And then we also have onshore virtual assistants. And then we have our in-house director of acquisitions. And if the deal makes it that far, then it goes to my partner, Joe, who's in charge of acquisition. So we have a whole team that's vetting a lot of deals. So it's something that, and we're very discriminating as to what kind of deals make it through our filters. And that really comes kind of, frankly, from my background in mergers and acquisitions in the corporate world. I was in the aerospace industry. We were growing aggressively through acquisition. I was working with some amazing people, Harvard MBAs, Wharton MBAs, big time private equity people. And so I'd learned way back then that, you really need to do a deep dive and a lot of scrubbing. And not only when you're looking at the deal, whether it's a company or facility or whatever, but when you're making your projections, you need to be conservative and really under promise and over deliver. So that's been kind of the culture and the mantra here at Dellrose Storage Group. When we look at a deal, we want to make sure that whatever numbers we're putting out to our friends and family investors, and now our new investors that we're bringing on, that we have a high degree of confidence that we're gonna beat those numbers. Because I think that unfortunately there are sponsors out there that do it the other way. And they might fool somebody for a deal or maybe two, but we're in this business for the long haul, and we have investors that we've worked with for many, many, many years, and they've brought their friends along with them, and they've invested more money. So that's some pretty solid anecdotal evidence that we're doing a good job. But again, it kind of goes back to my corporate training, which was amazing. But we have the key things that we're looking at for a deal. Number one, I alluded to earlier, is we are looking for that delta between the rent that is achievable in that market, as we can see from the competitors in that market, versus where this mom and pop operator has their rates. And you'd be really surprised to see, we're used to it now, but people who don't know storage in this way would be surprised to know that it is not uncommon at all for us to find a mom and pop charging 25, 35, 40% below market. Now, why is that? Well, a mom and pop, their key performance indicator, their KPI, is occupancy. They just want the units filled, because they don't want to have a website. They don't want to use technology. They want to have full units. So they're getting that mailbox money every month. And they turn a blind eye to delinquencies, and they, don't push rates because they don't want to upset the apple cart. Whereas we come in with our professional management team and our technology and our analysis of the market, and we can see that, the competitors are full and they're charging higher rates than us. So that gives us a lot of runway to go ahead and work that supply demand curve to increase those rates quite a bit. So we've successfully done that, many, many times now. But we're also looking for, like I mentioned, opportunities to implement more technology, like smart security cameras, smart lighting, those kinds of things. But the market is super important. So we do a deep dive looking at the competitors, looking at their pricing trends, the occupancy trends. We have these specialized databases that we subscribe to that track all that information. So we really rely on those, and we don't just go to one source, right? We triangulate. We're looking at one source, and then we're getting information from another source to make sure that those line up. And if they don't, then we do a little deeper dive to find out why. But we're looking at, population increases, jobs increasing. We're looking at poverty rates. We're looking at household income, looking at all those things, just like anybody who's, maybe buying a house or buying a multifamily property or investing in office or whatever. You need to know, like, what is the health of the market. So we spend just as much time on that as we do on looking at the actual subject property.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the condition of the market, I want to ask about some trends, because, to say the least, the past couple of years have been really disruptive to commercial real estate. So we've seen the rise and fall of the millennial workspace, the rise and fall of co-working, retail kind of on a constant decline, offices going away. So commercial is a broad category, has been relatively unstable. And it sounds like this is a good corner of commercial, but I'm sure that there are risks inherent in this space too. So what are some of the challenges that you're seeing in the market, and what are some things that we should be looking out for if you're making investments in self-storage spaces?
Sure. Yeah. Great question, Roy. So yeah, we had a great couple of years there with, kind of the COVID push. And what's funny about that is one of our mentors in our business is a guy who used to own, I think he owned like 19 or 20 self-storage facilities, which he since sold. But when COVID came up, he called like his staff and like laid everybody off. He thought it was going to be the end of storage. Well, unfortunately for him, but fortunate for us, I mean, it was actually ended up being a boon for self-storage, because people needed to all of a sudden change that spare bedroom at home into an office. So, but they didn't want to get rid of their bedroom furniture, so they had to store it, right? And then there's all kinds of other disruptions that really pushed the demand for storage. So we had a great couple of years there. But That's all behind us now. So we've had the kind of the post-COVID, correction, the downturn. The beginning of this year, 2023, was challenging in our business across our portfolio. We definitely had a soft occupancy. Our rates at many of our facilities were coming down. And so we definitely had to manage our way through that, because the one big driver for self-storage demand is households changing. So when houses stopped selling, right, because as interest rates went up, people were like, well, I'm not selling my house with my 4% loan on it and to go and get a 7 or 8% loan. So the residential real estate market really slowed down, and that impacted storage for sure. So we certainly had tenants that stayed, but if we lost a tenant, it was hard to get that unit filled back up. So that is why what I mentioned. So that's a big risk, right? But that's why I mentioned earlier, one of the strategic shifts that we're making is, instead of that unit going empty and us searching for a residential customer, we're now looking for a business customer as well, to try to mitigate that risk. Because the contractor, in your neighborhood, I don't know if you've tried to get an electrician over to your house recently, but man, it can be tough. You might have to wait a couple weeks to get that appointment booked, because they're all so busy. And I think that's pretty prevalent in many markets around the country. And then other shifts are, so we had an experience at a facility that we acquired, where a big REIT, a real estate investment trust, came into the market, and we knew this was happening, because that's part of the research we do when we're looking at a market, is we look to see what developments are coming online. And so we saw this one that was coming, and it was probably our first experience, though, in terms of what that really meant for the market. So this was a life storage facility. It was like 100,000 square feet, which is a big facility. When that facility comes online, and Life Storage, right, is a big real estate investment trust, so they have a lot of financial backing. They can afford to really lower their rates and suck up all the demand in that market. And then what they do is they rapidly increase rates on those new customers. So they kind of have this, churn and burn model, which of course our facility across town, it impacted us for sure. So we had tenants moving out and moving down the street because they were cheaper. And when those units did come available, it made it hard to fill those back up. So even though we saw that coming, and we probably could have done a better job of modeling that impact in our financial projections, but it was definitely a learning experience, and we tend to be generally conservative anyway, so we were able to absorb that kind of impact. But those are just a couple examples of some risks associated with self-storage. So if you're looking out there to invest in self-storage, just make sure your sponsor is really doing a good job, not only evaluating the subject property, but also the market.
I was going to ask about what happens if a big guy comes in and just builds their own facility. It's very similar to what Walmart would do. Back in the day, they'd open up a Walmart, and then all like the little shops around the Walmart would go out of business, and the pharmacy guy would close his shop and then go work for the Walmart pharmacy, right? So, I suppose that is a risk if you're purchasing, because, I'm looking on your website, some of the facilities, we all drive by them in our everyday life. You'll see it on the side of the road. And it's an open lot, with, 1 or 2 levels of storage facilities. The one we had in Boston was a multi-level one, but there was an elevator. Looks like on your website, it was a lot of ground level, drive right up and open the door. But if a big REIT comes in and builds the fancy new facility on the land they purchased, that could affect you guys. I could see that. It's like you almost want to run under the radar a little bit. You want these markets that they might not be paying attention to, or it's not worth their time to build that large facility, but it's still worth your time to kind of come in and improve what's already there.
100%, Jason. And that was one of the other things that happened during COVID was those big REITs, the real estate investment trusts, they're typically in your major metro markets. But what they did is, and as demand for storage was increasing, they did start building out in secondary markets, which they didn't really do much of that in the past. So that's why we're generally in secondary and tertiary markets for that exact reason. You know, we're in markets where we're hoping, or you know, that a big player isn't going to come in and suck up all the demand.
Yeah. Rory, before we get to some of the final questions, I want you to ask some legal questions here, because we're not talking about human tenants here. I'm hoping that there are no humans in your facilities, because it's a whole separate podcast.
Not supposed to be, but yeah.
There should be. I'm sure there's some stories.
Yeah.
Rory, when you're thinking about, you know, landlord tenant law, how does that
Mhm.
apply in this kind of situation? And, you know, maybe Tom can, you know, shed some light after some of your questions.
Well, I'd love to hear just a quick outline of what it's like to evict somebody from one of these storage facilities, because, you know, in some states, like the state where we're sitting right now, Massachusetts, it's very, very difficult to evict a human tenant from a residential unit. You can be caught up in court for months, and it's a very expensive endeavor. So it means that it's very important to select the right tenants at the outset, and to have a plan and be able to withstand the eviction process from the landlord perspective. And it makes the whole investment decision to enter the space a complicated one. I think some of it's going to be some people who may have first imagined that they would get into the residential space might hear this and think about this is a good opportunity. So I want you to explain a little bit what the eviction looks like and what some of the legal risks are for owners of self-storage spaces.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me answer that by telling you a quick story. And as I'm getting older in age, my stories tend to drag out. I'll try not to do that here. But so I used to own some rental properties in Philadelphia, right? So that's tough, kind of like where you guys are. It's tough market to be a landlord. So I had a tenant who every year she was late toward the end of the year, right? And she was spending money on other, you know, holiday type things instead of paying her rent. Well, you know, one year and then she would get caught up, but, you know, one year she wasn't able to do that. And so I had to go through the eviction process. And it took a long time. I don't remember exactly how long, but it wasn't quick. It wasn't a month or two. It was probably 5 or 6 months. And so she was finally evicted. Well, after she was evicted, she somehow, I don't even know how she pulled this off, but she made some petition to the court and got herself reinstated and moved back into my unit that she had just been evicted from. So, I mean, that's not the kind of sticky tenant that you want. Now compare that to self-storage, right? So self-storage, as you pointed out, right? You're not housing people, you're housing stuff. So that takes you out of landlord tenant world and it puts you into lien law world. So in a lien law situation, it's very cut and dry. I think there might be little nuances from here to there in different jurisdictions, but by and large, when a tenant is 60 days past due, on day 61, they get a notice that says, hey, you're 60 days past due. You need to pay or within 7 days, or we're going to sell your stuff. So we have auction sites, unlike the storage wars. I know it's not as, you know, great on TV, but everything's done online now, right? So the manager will go take photos of the contents inside the unit, post those pictures online, and then the auction takes place. And this is the beautiful thing as well, is the winner of the auction has 72 hours to come and get their stuff. And so they, within 72 hours, have to come and clean out my unit and be on their way. So we can be in there, you know, do a little broom sweep out, oil the springs and the door, and we can have that unit back up for rent, if not rented again that afternoon. So that is a huge advantage, because I know in my life as a landlord, man, I'm still scarred from that, even though it's been many years. You know, when the tenant moves out, if you even can get them out, now you're going to have to rehab, you know, basically do like a mini rehab, right? Because, you know, you're going to have to do paint, carpet, and who knows what else. And that can take, especially, you know, because it's tough to get good contractors and all that sort of thing. I mean, that can take months, right? And then, you got to put it back on the market, hope you get a good tenant that time. The time compression in storage is so important and so valuable as an investor, because that downtime is just really, really, really minimized. That's been our experience with self-storage lien law versus rental unit, landlord tenant situation.
I'd have to think that the courts are a little more forgiving to people that aren't paying their rent versus possessions, right?
Sure.
So there's a little more compassion involved, and you could hear a sob story, and suddenly, as a landlord, you don't have someone paying your mortgage for a year, whereas for a facility, it's like, wait a second, you put your stuff there and you stop paying, okay.
Right.
Out the
Yeah,
door, right?
exactly. Well, and one other note I forgot to mention is, of course, during COVID, right, there were eviction moratoriums, right? So tenants couldn't be evicted, which put multifamily operators in a real pickle, right? Well, that moratorium did not apply to self-storage, even though we had plenty of tenants who would try to invoke that to save their stuff. Said, well, sorry, we'll work with you, but that eviction moratorium does not apply to self-storage.
All right, so I got to talk about Storage Wars a little bit, since I used to watch that all the time, right? And you're not the expert on this, but
Right,
like
yeah.
when you're auctioning off a unit, like is there actually anything of substance, of value inside these units that people end up buying?
Sure, there can be. The big things are tools, right? Tools are valuable. Sometimes might be instruments in there. We found we had a unit that had a bunch of like vintage guitars in there. But most of the time it's, old clothes or furniture that nobody wants, or broken stuff, or, so a lot of times there's not a whole lot there, but there can be some nuggets here and there that might have some value.
Yeah, because if you haven't seen that show, it was, I don't know if it's still on right now, but I don't know if they're doing new episodes, but they'd open the door, everyone would look in, as best as you can, right? There's no photos or anything. You kind of get a quick look, and then they auction it off. And then you start cleaning it out, like you stumble upon whatever stuff, and then you go try to sell it at pawn shops or whatever else. And that was kind of the premise of the 30-minute episode. And then somehow they would calculate how much they paid for the storage unit versus how much they sold the goods for. And who knows how much of that is actually true, but because it has to be summed up in a 30-minute episode. But that was a fascinating show. I don't, that was back when, you'd watch anything on cable. You're like, oh, storage facility reality TV. I'll watch this stuff. Yeah.
That's right.
So why don't we get to the final couple questions as a way to wrap up the interview? We're going to link up your website in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want to figure out a way to get involved with Tom and invest in some of the properties that Dellrose Storage Group does, it's all on the website. I should ask you, we did say this before we hit record, but the origin of your name, of the company, tell us that.
Sure. Well, nobody gets their best ideas in the office, right? In your office, you're always grinding through whatever meetings and, dealing with people, whatnot. So my business partner and I, my partner, Joe, and I have been partners going on 14 years. So our practice when we are looking for some new ideas or want to vet some things out or just talk some things through is we go to a bar. And so we'll have a couple of beers and we'll talk through like what the ideas are. So the self-storage business got its origin at a place called 333 Dellrose Bar and Grill here in Radnor, Pennsylvania. So we said, all right, well, let's call it Dellrose Storage Group. And so we have a few other entities back from our prior businesses that also have origins of names from the bars where those ideas were hatched. So
an excellent tradition. I certainly support that. I think legend has it that Southwest Airlines started on the back of a cocktail napkin, right? So
I believe it. Yeah.
All right. We ask these questions of all of our guests as a way of wrapping up the interview and getting to know you a little bit better, Tom. First one of these is if you can get on stage for half an hour and talk about any subject in the world with zero preparation, what would that be?
Wow. Well, since my mind at the moment is kind of in business mindset, I would say the importance of building a team, and a team that is driven by a common core purpose and core values.
All right. Second question, tell us something that happened early in your life or career that impacts the way that you're working today.
Sure. Wow. Well, the first part of my entrepreneurial career was quite interesting because I actually got fired from my corporate job in 2006, and I decided that that was the kick in the pants that I needed to go and start my entrepreneurial, real estate empire, right? So 2006, not great timing, right? So the next few years, even though I had this great, education and business background and mentorship and that sort of thing, man, I got my butt whooped those next few years. And so I think the thing that I really learned there was about preparing better. Like, I thought because I had an MBA and I worked at these great companies that I could do this by myself. I could handle this. Well, I think it's super important to surround yourself with people and get a great team going, and build business systems and that sort of thing. Because I think that would have saved me a lot of pain and heartache of going through the Great Recession the way that I did. And that's what we're doing here now at Dellrose Storage Group. We have an amazing team that we very carefully built over time. In fact, we didn't even buy our first storage facility until we had the business plan together, we had the values and the mission together, and we had our team together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people that have those great pedigrees, they go through corporate, they rise the ranks really quickly. They have the MBAs from the great schools and what have you. They don't see it coming, but when a recession hits or there's a downturn, the balance sheet doesn't care about where you went to business school. It just doesn't, right?
That's right.
And a lot of people my age, I'm in my late 40s right now. If you listen to this many years later, I'll be in my 50s. But, a lot of people my age, Gen X, they're in the middle management to upper management years of their career. And those are the easy people to cut when you need to start making some cuts, because you could find some younger, cheaper people that could probably do it for a little bit less money. And, you as a company could restart again with a younger manager. So I think there's a lot of people that are out there listening to this. Since I just wrote something on LinkedIn last week that I've gotten a lot of comments from, all great. Basically the past 18 months has been my entrepreneurial journey away from the W-2 world where I worked for a long time. And I've heard from so many different people about just how they love reading the story. It's hard, when you're in that spot and you're like, geez, I feel like I'm at risk, or I feel like I don't like what I do anymore. And I feel like I need that next chapter, but I don't really know where to start with it. And then suddenly your company cuts you and you're like, all right, well, now what do I do? I can't just bemoan the fact that I'm not thrilled with where I am. Now I got to do something. And that was probably a position that you were in, almost 15, 20 years ago. And I think a lot of people are going through it right now. And there's no easy answer. My answer to all that is start today, start diversifying, your income streams, and start with your plan B and your plan C right now. So when the time comes that you have to focus in on that, you have a number of years of track record instead of oh, I think I'd like to start this company today. It doesn't always work that way.
100%. Yeah, I was 38 with a 4 and a 2-year-old at home. So
not uncommon. Again, business doesn't care. They can be super, they can realize, oh, what cute kids you have. I'm sorry, your position's been eliminated. Today we recorded this day, Spotify just cut 17% of their staff today, right? They put out Spotify Unwrapped, earlier, a couple of weeks ago, whenever it was. There's a lot of press about them. They put that out. Everyone loves Spotify. Then suddenly, their third layoff of the year. This one is the biggest. Yeah, it happens all the time. Happy 4 and 2-year-old. Right. Final question. Tell us something you're listening to or watching or reading these days.
Oh man. Well, you can see over my shoulder here, I'm a big Dan Sullivan fan. Who Not How. His book 10x Easier Than 2x is really cool. But it's easy to get kind of stuck in that the business book rut. So I would encourage folks out there to start looking at some things outside of a business. So I've been reading well, one of my favorite books that I try to read like maybe every year, every other year is called The Last Place on Earth. And it's the story of this basically Norwegian hippie guy, Raoul Amundsen, and his venture to be the first to the South Pole. And he's up against he and his motley crew of these Norsemen are up against the very well-funded, very well-trained, but very arrogant British Navy. And so it's an amazing story about not only the adventure of getting to the South Pole, but also there's some amazing leadership lessons in there about putting your team together and preparing and having a plan and executing on the plan, and not just relying on, hey, I'm in the British Navy, that we're the best in the world and we're the best financed and we're going to go just knock this out in an afternoon. It was kind of their approach. So yeah, I won't spoil the book, but The Last Place on Earth, I highly recommend.
Rory, I love how Tom mentioned a business book and a non-business book. I mean, it really does show that you can get so stuck in the business book rut, right? And they all start to sound the same. It's important to be well-rounded and have something entirely off the rails that is not connected to, how to improve your productivity or, complete your work in 5 minutes, right?
That's right.
No, we can't read the same 12 books over and over and over again. That's not healthy. And that's not actually stimulating us, you intellectually as well.
With that said, Who Not How is a fantastic choice. So yes.
It definitely is. Definitely a mindset here at Dellrose Storage Group. When we run up against a problem or an obstacle or what have you, we used to just, try to smash through walls and just figure it out ourselves. But, we've gotten a little more advanced in age, we're trying to be smarter about things. And so we are looking at who can help us overcome this obstacle, who is better at this particular thing than we are. And we go and we get them involved. It just makes life a lot easier.
Well, Tom, we appreciate all the conversation and all the knowledge about self-storage. If you're still listening to this, hopefully you didn't find it boring, even though it's a boring investment class. You're not going to see many new episodes about renovating storage facilities on TV these days, but it certainly make a ton of money if you're partner with the right people, finding the right investments. We will link up in the show notes your website and ways to contact you, Tom. And if you're listening and are more interested, I would certainly encourage you to reach out to Tom at Dellrose Storage Group, and he'll be more than happy to have conversations about the self-storage and how you might want to include this as a passive investment, with whatever else you're investing in these days. Rory, where can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more about the work you're doing or anything you might know about legal self-storage work?
You can just go to rorygill.com and you can connect with me a few different ways there and see different ways I can help you out.
All right. You can reach me at jasonmuth.com, where you can email me if you want to be a guest on the podcast or learn more about the work that I have been up to. Tom, thank you so much for this conversation. We really appreciate it.
That was great. Jason and Roy, thank you guys so much. And I hope I was able to make this boring topic a little more exciting.
Yeah, far more exciting than, I would have expected. Not that I thought that this is going to be a boring episode, but, I loved how you talk about boring investments on your Instagram page. And, this is, far from it. There's so much involved here. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, we appreciate your comments and 5-star reviews. So go to wherever you're listening to this and drop that review right there. On behalf of Rory and Tom, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.